Hey, so I just want to say that I'm sorry for this video taking so long for it to come out. I started working on it about 2 weeks ago when they first dropped the announcement for Skills 2.0. I wanted the video to be a bit more than what it currently is. It's not as edited as I wanted it to be because of how much news has been coming out for Payday 3 that I gotta finish this up so I can get onto that. Because it's there's a lot, all right? There's a lot I gotta go into, and I have some opinions. So as you're watching, just keep in mind that like 95% of this was recorded before the live stream that basically told us that we're not going to get an offline mode. Well, like that's a subject for a different video altogether, and that'll come out sometime this week, hopefully. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Just keep that in mind, all right? So it looks like we're getting rid of the current skill line and edge, rush, and grit skill system that we have in Payday 3 and going back to something more traditional like what we had in Payday 2. Hello everybody, CabooseDOTexe here, and today we're going to be talking about two pieces of Payday news. First off, I want to talk about something that's really positive and I'm really looking forward to with the next update for Payday 3. Afterwards, I'm going to be going over some controversy that happened the same time we got this announcement for Skills 2.0. I actually did some digging when this controversy first started, and I found some things that might be a bit surprising to you. Now, the bulk of this video is going to be mostly the stuff involving Payday 3, so if you're just here for that Payday 2 controversy, you can skip ahead to the timestamp on screen, or use the chapter feature to find it. I don't know what I'm going to call it just yet while I'm recording this audio, so on screen is what the chapter is going to be called. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the part that I actually am here to really talk about. I'm so excited to talk about this. In the latest blog post celebrating the end of year 2 for Payday 3, they showed off a preview of the new skill system, which is actually the old skill system, but that's what people really wanted for Payday 3. So we are getting what we asked for. And as one of the results of all this, we're going to be doing away with the edge, grit, and rush buff system. Long gone are the days of us having to shoot one shot, then reload the weapon, just so that way we can maintain our edge and grit, so that way we can have ammo funnel and replenish. If you also did this, please let me know in the comments, because I've been doing this for the past 2 years and I'm not sure if I'm the only one or not. I can't be, right? The reason they stated in the blog post that they're doing away with that system is because it was confusing players early on and it didn't provide the dynamic gameplay that they originally hoped for. And honestly, I can see why. When I first started playing Payday 3, I was kind of confused as to what these three buffs were. Realizing what they were and what they do and how they can affect what skills do what made me go, okay, well, I need to figure out how to get each one of these things. Which then came the problem of figuring out how to get grit, because there's barely any skills that give it to you. So maintaining it was more important. And so began the metagame of maintaining your buffs more so than doing the objectives and completing the heist. Hence why I constantly shoot one shot, then reload, just so I can maintain what I have. Unfortunately though, that meant that I spent more time looking at the bottom of my screen than what was directly in front of me. So I'm glad we're going back to the more traditional system. I mean, it might not be anything new, but sometimes that's okay. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and even then, we're still doing something slightly different from what it looks like. Whatever it is, it's going to be probably a lot better. If my memory serves me correctly, apparently Mila only put together this skill line system in about a week. Which for like a week's worth of work, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good, but I mean, we needed something better. Now, it's important to note that everything we're going to go through in this video is subject to change. All the numbers, descriptions, functionality, costs, everything is subject to change and is just a work in progress. On top of that, it's going to be a bit complex, so if you're someone who needs more of a visual aspect to it and just kind of wants to follow along, there's a link to the blog post in the description of this video. So starting off with the soldier skill trees, the first one we have is the Juggernaut. The first tier skill is called Extra Protection. For every point in this skill line, gain 1% damage reduction to armor chunks. Total damage reduction cannot exceed 80%. If you ace this perk, you get an additional 0.05% damage reduction per skill point for every point of trauma your current armor chunk has. So I want to point out that a lot of these tier 1 skills are going to be like this. They're going to be the for every point you put in this skill line, gain X. A lot of these skill trees kind of have a theme amongst them. They focus on a specific thing like SMGs or shotguns or ECMs, and that tier 1 benefits them in a very similar way that this one does for armor chunks. You'll see what I mean as we go along. The second thing I want to talk about is how you're going to have to use this. You won't be able to use impact or even probably adaptive. With that said though, the damage reduction increasing to the amount that it does is significant. I mean, 80% is a lot. Moving on to our first tier 2 skill, Headguard. The normal for this one is headshots reduce armor regeneration time by 0.2 seconds. Acing it makes it 0.6 seconds. Honestly, this is fantastic if you're using Impact or Adaptive, especially with Impact, which has like a 3-second recharge. Of course, this is all assuming that Armor 2.0 isn't going to get another adjustment. But since it's such a recent thing, I can't imagine they weren't making that with this in mind. As for our second tier 2 Armor Up 1, the normal is that you just get 1 additional charge, and the ace is you get 2 more charges. There is a tier 3 called Armor 2, which gives you 2 additional charges, and if you ace it, you get an additional armor back. Now, the other tier 3 one is Beast of Burden. This is the one that we all are gonna love, because the normal is that you can carry 2 bags at once, but you will have that movement penalty. Acing it will remove that movement penalty, unless, of course, their bags are heavy. For our last skill in tier 4, we have Bastion. The normal is that you disengage from zappers and cloakers' stun attacks. This ability has a 30-second cooldown. Acing it automatically deflects the Dozer's Bull Rush attach. Attach? You mean attack? Did nobody proofread this? Because we saw a skill line earlier. Anyway, you can deflect the Bulldozer's rush attack, and you face no movement penalty from the Nader's gas cloud. Personally, I don't know if I would use this myself, but it is a very convenient thing to have. Now, the next skill tree in the soldier lineup is Commando. No, not that one. First up, the tier 1 is Rifleman. The normal is for every point in this skill line, assault rifles and LMGs gain an additional 0.1 armor penetration. Now, acing this will make it so assault rifles and LMGs reload faster by 2.5% for each point in this skill line. This bonus also doubles when reloading with an empty magazine. So I wonder if that means it's going to be faster to reload empty at times, where the tier 1 skill makes it so every time you use a skill point in this skill tree, it makes it stronger. This is also where we get to see another reoccurring theme with all these skill trees. Kinda cool, right? It's different. I like this. I think it's an interesting idea. Now, moving on to our tier 2, the first skill is Focus Fire. Each hit with an assault rifle or LMG grants a 2% accuracy boost until you reload, swap weapons, or miss a shot. Acing it makes it so that way the bonus no longer ends from missing a shot and instead only decreases by 2%. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means when it comes to the reload or swap aspects of that, but it does mean that your assault rifles and LMGs are just going to get better as you use them. Moving on to our second tier 2 stockpile, Assault. Now, this is another one that we're going to see a lot of repeats as we go on. Stockpile is a consistent one in a lot of these skill trees, and it behaves the same way, basically carrying more of whatever this skill tree is going to be focusing on. In this case, it's just more ammo for assault rifles and LMGs. So moving on to our tier 3, first up is Breaking Point. Armor penetration for assault rifles and LMGs increases by 0.05 for each hit that does not penetrate an enemy's armor. This bonus stacks infinitely and ends once the enemy is killed, and acing it makes that bonus 0.15. This is really good for penetration, which we're going to see a lot of changes when it comes to penetration and armor breaking as we go on with these skills. Honestly, this skill tree is very simple, and it kind of proves that with the next one, Hollow Point rounds, where we just get 15% more damage, and acing it only increases it to 40, and this is only for assault rifles and LMGs. It's not till we get to tier 4 where we see a familiar face. Ammo funnel. Only now it only works for assault rifles and LMGs, and acing it gives you replenish. Remember when a year ago they wanted to remove ammo funnel and replenish, and there was a huge revolt amongst the community to not do that? For those people who are really up in arms about it, I really want to know what your thoughts are about it being changed in this way. Because I feel like shotguns benefited the most from ammo funnel and replenish, at least until the update where ammo was kind of redone on how pickup works. On one hand, shotguns weren't getting nearly as much ammo as before, but now LMGs and assault rifles are the only things that can get it, so SMGs and marksman rifles and sniper rifles are out of the question. Now, when they first announced that they wanted to change ammo funnel and replenish, I was also kind of like, whoa, why are you guys doing that? These skills are what's making the game a lot of fun. I wasn't one of those people who was sending death threats to the developers, but I was saying like, hey, this might not be a good idea. I understand that you want to kind of do away with certain things, but come on, don't be Helldivers too, because remember when those guys were constantly nerfing everything that was fun? And then it took them 60 days to undo everything and make the game actually enjoyable again? I mean, they lost a lot of players when they did that. And Payday 3 was in no situation to go through an issue like that again. They were finally moving upwards in terms of quality, so that just kind of put a halt on that for a little bit. And while I'm glad that they didn't actually remove those skills, I don't think the death threats were necessary. But I think since we're completely redoing the skills, I think it's fine to move away from ammo funnel and replenish as a necessity. Because as we go along, you're going to start to see that there's a lot of good skills being added to the game. Now, not all of them are going to be fantastic, but I think for the most part, we got a lot of fun skills coming up here. So this change is a bold one to show on the first page, but I think it's a well-deserved change in order to highlight all the other possibilities that they're going to have with Skills 2.0. Our last skill tree for the soldier set is Grenadier, which focuses primarily on frag grenades specifically. The other grenades each have their own skill tree that we will be talking about soon. And as you would expect from the tier 1s, Bombs Away is one of those ones where every point in the skill line improves it, and in this case it's damage. And if you ace it, its radius also increases. Its tier 2 skill Burn Damage makes it so that way any enemy that was hurt by the frag grenade will then receive an additional damage from all sources. Acing it will make that go from 15% to 45%. This is kind of like the equivalent of marking your enemy when you have skills for it. Now, as we go along through these skill trees, you'll notice that this kind of idea of weakening the opponent to certain forms of damage is something that's going to be kind of a common theme. Much like the last skill tree, we have Stockpile, but this time for frag grenades, giving you 1 additional frag grenade, but 3 if you ace it. And honestly, I'm not sure if that one's really necessary when you have a tier 3 skill called Scavenger, which gives you the ability to pick up throwables when you pick up ammo. Starting with a 2% chance, and acing it will raise it to a 5% chance. Now, an interesting thing is that we're going to see other skills that will do something very similar. So I'm wondering if that stuff's going to stack, or more than likely going to be subject to change. The other tier 3 one we have is Sudden Impact, which basically just makes the frag grenades blow up on impact. And if you ace it, it makes it so it does additional damage for whoever gets hit by that initial impact. So if you were tired of grenades kind of rolling around for a bit, there's your solution for that. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, frag grenades aren't that effective to begin with. I mean, even with the more damage, is it going to be enough? Well, tier 4 skill I think is going to fix that for you. With Mad Bomber over here, your grenade explodes, it'll give you a 25% chance to get it back. And acing it will make it so that way it makes 2 smaller grenades, each dealing 30% of the original grenade's damage. And those smaller grenades have a 10% chance to restore 1 frag grenade. So with a lot of these skills, you can basically just keep tossing grenades. You're just gonna be throwing grenades everywhere. Might as well just bring a Mamba with you, right? And honestly, I would love to do some challenge runs where I'm just running around throwing frag grenades. That sounds like a lot of fun. I know that's something that I can kind of do now, but this feels like it's a lot more viable. Like, yeah, it'll be a meme run, but I feel like it'll be more fun. So that wraps up the soldier skill tree set. And honestly, I think it's an okay way to start. It kind of shows some of the simple ones, but then we're going to get into some more complex ideas with the following skill trees. Like for instance, with the ninja skill trees that we have here, the first one we got is Ghost, which also has a really fun tagline: dodge, chop, pick, slide, and dodge. It's not the 5 Ds, but you know, it's close enough. And we're starting off with this one with a great tier 1 that I am so happy that we're going to see return to this game, and that's Dodge. Dodge is coming back. This is called Dodge This. I did not make a lot of sense in that sentence, in that paragraph I just put together, but I'm honestly improvising a lot of this as I'm kind of going along. I'm not really writing a script for this episode. I'm just kind of reading what we got here and just giving my opinions live. As the name suggests, for every point in this skill line, gain a permanent 2.5% chance to dodge incoming damage. Your maximum dodge chance decreases by 20% for each active armor chunk, and acing it makes it so standing still for 2 seconds increases your dodge chance by 2.5 for every point in this skill line. I don't know why you're going to be standing still in this game, but hey, if you ever need to, there you go. I mean, I guess it's good for those maps that still use those stupid circles like 99 boxes, but I'm hoping this isn't a sign that there's going to be more circles in the future. I feel like at this point, Starbreeze has learned we don't like those things in our game. So having a skill that's going to make that play out a little better, I guess is nice for the ones that we already have, unless they're going to rechange it at some point, which would be nice. But I can tell you this, I'm probably not going to use Ace for this at any time in the future, unless, does it count if you're like standing on top of the moving trucks in like Road Rage? Because if it does there, it might not be terrible. But moving on to our tier 2, first up we got Judo Chop, courtesy of Austin Powers, which honestly doesn't feel like it's that necessary either, but I guess if you have extra perks for stealth, you can use it here. What it does is it makes it so a quick melee and an unalerted guard will kill them instantly. This is something that was in Payday 2 by default. Whether you shot them or you meleeed them, they would die instantly as long as they weren't alerted. And it didn't matter if they had armor or not. Like the murky water people in Shadow Raid, yeah, instantly dead. Acing this skill just makes it so that way guards and civilians have to look closer at those dead bodies. I'm not quite sure how useful this would actually be in practice. And honestly, I would prefer there just being melee in the game by default instead of this. So Starbreeze, I think this is something that may need to be redone for when this thing fully comes out. But the next one, Flow State, is something that I know we're all going to be excited for because that involves having more dodge. What's better than having a lot of armor to protect you from taking damage, not being able to take that damage in the first place? Whenever anyone tries to shoot you or punch you, you're going to have your dodge increase by 2.5% until you perform a successful dodge. So every time you get shot, the percentage chance of you dodging the next one increases until it happens. I can't tell you how nice it is to finally have dodge fully come back into Payday 3, and I'm excited to see how that's going to go moving forward. And we're not done with the dodge yet. There are still more skills in this tree, like Under Pressure, which makes it so successfully dodging any damage restores 2 points of health. And acing it makes it so when damage is at maximum, those points are converted to adrenaline, as they should be. And even then, we're still not done with dodge. There's still more dodge in this tree and in future trees. The next skill, though, is Locksmith. It doesn't involve dodge, but it does make it so it only takes one lockpick jiggle to successfully pick a lock. Something that we already have in Payday 3, and is honestly a pretty good skill to have on you, especially if you're stealthing. But acing it makes it even better, because now you can just quick melee on a locked door to unlock it instead of breaking it. So if you ever felt like you wanted to just shoot the lock, now you can just punch it. Kind of like punching a drill to turn it back on, right? I wonder though, will this work on something like the lock boxes in No Rest for the Wicked? Because if that's the case, that's going to make that heist a lot faster. I know there's only 2 things in there that you actually need in order to complete the heist fully, but there's something coming up about instant loot that you're going to want to know. And it's in one of the other skill trees we're going to be talking about today. But not the tier 4 skill for Ghost, which is On the Run, which is while sprinting or sliding, and for the 2 seconds afterwards, your dodge chance increases by 15%. Acing it lets you just shoot and reload SMGs while sprinting or sliding, which is convenient. It is nice. I mean, who doesn't love that? But the real thing is that sprinting, sliding, and the 2 seconds afterwards, that 15% dodge, that's a big percentage to just have given to you for a little while. You're going to see people just sliding all over the map at this point, and I already know Nova, my friend, already does that. So this is just basically icing on the cake for him. Anyway, moving on to our second skill tree for Ninja, we got Special Ops, or Spec Ops as I'll be calling it, not to be confused with Spec Ops The Line, the amazing game that came out a long time ago that you should play. But our first skill here is just for SMGs. This whole skill tree here is going to be focusing heavily on SMGs. They might as well just call it the SWAT skill tree if you catch my cold. The normal for this one will make it so that way you'll do extra damage to enemy armor for each skill point you use, and acing it will add in the recoil reduction for the SMGs. Not that recoil is something that they always seem to really have a problem with. Honestly, they seem pretty stable weapons already. Now our tier 2 is where it starts to get a little interesting. Not the stockpile one, which is the same as the previous ones we've been seeing, but the multitasker one. The normal for it is when you break an enemy's armor layer with an SMG, that enemy becomes heavily staggered. Acing it makes it so performing a quick melee on an enemy while wielding an SMG will reload it instantly. Now this has a 10-second cooldown, but I think we can all agree that it's a lot faster to punch someone than it is to reload a weapon, right? In my head, I just kind of picture someone holding an SMG clotheslining someone and then their gun's fully loaded and they can just keep shooting. That's kind of a cool image I think about it. Now the 2 tier 3 skills go from being something very simple with Cracked to something that's a bit more complex with Steady Hands. With Cracked, all it does is it makes it so that way you do additional damage to enemies that you broke the armor with an SMG. 10% on the normal, 30% with the aced. Now Steady Hands does something very interesting, but a little niche if you ace it. When you use an SMG to kill an enemy within 6 meters, you gain a buff that increases your hipfire accuracy. And if you kill someone that's further than 6 meters, you get an increase to your ADS accuracy. Both are things that are actually really nice because SMGs are great when you're hipfiring them in close range, but they might struggle for longer range enemies. Acing it makes it so that way when you kill any enemy in any way, you get the increase for both. That one does feel a bit more niche. The aced version of this skill would be good for maps like Boys in Blue, Party Powder, or Delivery Charge. Maps that have inside inside areas as well as long range outside areas where there will be a bunch of snipers. Now the last skill here, SM Genius, is a bit of a tricky one. The wording is a bit confusing, but it does sound pretty good regardless. Basically, whenever you reload an empty magazine for your SMG, you gain a damage buff. And this can be done up to 10 times. Once the stack reaches 10, it will then expire after 10 seconds. Now, acing this will increase the stack's limit to 20, but it does word things a little differently. The way it's worded for the ace makes it sound like you don't have to reload your SMG. It's just general. Whenever you break an enemy's armor, you get this buff. And if that's the case, that means that if you're shooting at an enemy, you've run out of ammo, but you broke its armor layer, and you get 1 point there, and then you reload that empty mag, do you get a second point? And if this is the case, does it have to then be an SMG that breaks the armor? As we'll see in other skill trees, there are other ways you can break enemy armor. There's a lot of ways actually. So the question then becomes is it worth getting this alongside other ways to break enemy armor layers in order to give this a boost? That's what I'm really curious about. Now our last skill tree here for the ninja set is Fog Machine. And as you can guess by the name, it focuses heavily on smoke grenades. And as we go through this skill tree, just keep the perk deck Sicario in mind. For our tier 1 heavy smoker, it does the same thing that you would expect. Every point makes these skills better. The base version just increases the range. I'm assuming it means how big the smoke cloud is, and acing it will increase the duration of how long the smoke is there. Those ones don't sound like they're all that great, but when you add in everything that I'm about to tell you, then it gets insane. First up, we have Brain Fog. The normal for this is that enemies affected by your smoke grenade will deal 20% less damage while caught in the cloud, and this effect will continue 5 seconds after they escape the smoke. Acing it will increase that 20 to 60%. That's a big difference, and if you have a very big smoke grenade, they're gonna be in there for a while. They're gonna deal with that for quite some time. They might not survive. Then of course you have Stockpile, which we know about, but then moving on to tier 3, we have Poisonous Gas. Now it's your turn to be the nader. Enemies will suffer 10 points of health damage per second when they stand inside that smoke cloud. Of course though, this doesn't affect naders and apparently also dozers. And acing this will just increase the damage from 10 to 25. So if you're like me and you love using the poison gas in Payday 2, then well, guess what? It's back, baby. Oh, I'm excited for this. I'm gonna gas the hell out of them. Sorry, I don't know what it is, but when it comes to gassing people, I love it. I use it all the time in the finals whenever I play, which is like a daily basis at this point. Now we got 2 skills here that are gonna make your smoke grenades more dangerous towards the enemies. But what about you? Well, how about Smoke Screen, the tier 3 skill, which will make it so that way if you have any dodge, it will double when you're standing in the smoke. And if you don't got any dodge, you'll just gain 25%, which is still really good. And acing this will make it so that way this applies to all your crew members. Sounds a lot like Sicario now, doesn't it? I mean, you can basically recreate a lot of these perk decks from Payday 2 in Payday 3 with what we've seen here in this announcement. So while perk decks may not return, we can at least create our own, which is what we were doing in the end of Payday 2 anyway with Copycat. Now, much like the last one, the tier 4 one here is also phrased in a way that's a little confusing, and there's also what I'm assuming is a typo. From what I can understand of this one, and correct me if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to be spreading misinformation here. But it seems like instead of getting downed, if you were supposed to go down, instead of going down, you drop a smoke grenade. And after doing so, you have a 100% chance to dodge for 6 seconds. You're basically just invincible for 6 seconds. Now this will still cost you a down and will have a 2-minute cooldown. So that's why I think you don't actually go down. And there is a stipulation where it does not apply to fall damage or being stunned by a zapper, and I think that makes sense. It's hard to move when you're being tased, and when it comes to the fall damage, what? Are you just gonna throw a grenade as you're falling and then quickly do a combat roll when you land? No, the Payday crew don't know how to do that. What is this, GTA? As for the ace, every time you get a headshot, that smoke increases in size, and this has gotta be a typo here, because there's no way it's gonna increase by 4,444%. After a few headshots, the entire map is just going to be covered in smoke. So it's got to be a typo. Either way though, this skill tree makes me actually really want to use smoke grenades. Something that I don't typically want to use in any game. let alone a Payday game. At least in something like Enlisted, I'm blocking other players. With Payday being a PvE game, I don't know how the AI works when it comes to smoke grenades. Like, does their accuracy get worse if the smoke is involved? And if so, how does it work exactly? I mean, it's gotta be a little tricky to program, right? Something that I did notice is absent from this skill tree is the ability to mark the enemies using the smoke grenades. Now, I believe the skill to mark enemies using a smoke grenade is already in Payday 3, but I'm assuming they're removing it for Skills 2.0 for balancing reasons. Because as we're gonna go forward, you're gonna see a lot of skills that benefit from marking enemies. It's possible that they just completely forgot about the skill, but if they did put it in the game, it would offer some very fun synergies. But let's move on to our next set of skill trees, the mechanic skill tree. So you can assume that this is going to involve sentries, which we're going to see right off the bat with the engineer skill tree.
I'm an engineer. That means I solve problems.
Which honestly, if you're a TF2 player, makes sense. I mean, that lines up, right? I mean, does this mean we're going to get a TF2 crossover? Is that confirmed now? Are we going to see the sentry again? I mean, that'd be pretty cool. I would love to see that. By the way, there is a mod for Payday 2 that does turn your sentries into a level 2 sentry from TF2. I feel like a level 1 or a mini sentry would make a lot more sense though. But anyway, as you would expect, the tier 1 does the same thing. Every point that's in the skill line, it gets better. The basic version of this is going to make it so that way it doesn't overheat as easily, and acing it will make it so that way it has more armor penetration. And honestly, if you're building into sentries, you're probably going to put a lot of points into sentries, all right? You're watching Hotline?
I know you're out there. I see you out there using them sentries.
I know you're using them.
Now, because these are sentries, we're not going to have stockpile like we'd had with the previous entries.
Instead, we got Repair Job,
which allows you to just punch your sentry to remove some of the overheating, which is something that I've been doing with my car's fan. I've been punching it to make it work better. Nothing like a little percussive maintenance on your electronics, right?
And acing this skill will just basically make that punch more effective. Instead of 5%, you're looking at 25%. But now if you zap it with a shock grenade, it also cools it down completely.
Not quite sure how that works, but hey, who am I to judge? The other tier 2 one we have is Artificial Ally. The base version of it will make it so that way you and your crew get more ammo when you're standing within 2 meters of your sentry, and acing it will give your sentry a full 360. Nothing really groundbreaking, but I mean, if you're going to be building sentries, then you're going to want the 360 degree availability for it.
For tier 3, we have Shields Up. Sentry turrets suffer 20% less heat buildup from enemy attacks and interference, and acing it will make it so that way it's 50 instead of 20.
Now, obviously, this is going to be good to have, just so you don't have to worry about that heat buildup. I mean, if it does, then you can always just punch it, I guess, right? Now, the other one is Sentry Squad. Now, as you would expect, given the name, it allows you to have multiple sentries, and from what it seems like, you can have, like, 4 sentries total. But that's only if you ace it, and when you ace it, those sentries, when you have, I guess, all 4 of them out, are going to overheat faster. Now, with them overheating twice as fast, that seems like it would be a problem, but if you have Repair Job, you could just run between them constantly punching them, right? My guess is you won't even be shooting the enemies, you'll just be on sentry maintenance duty, fully embodying that TF2 engineer. All you're missing is the engineer's getup and the wrench, so hopefully if they add melee, one of the first things they're gonna have is the wrench, so that way you can embody the engineer. Now the final skill we have in our tier 4 is Machine War, and in essence what this does is just increase the damage of your sentries. For every enemy it kills, then you get a 3% increase in damage. And this bonus ends when it overheats or is removed from the field. Now if you ace this skill, which you should do if you're running sentries, it will make it so that way your sentries not only do 5% more as opposed to 3, but it applies this bonus to all sentries in the network. On top of that, it makes it so that way it no longer ends the bonus, but just reduces the damage by 20%. This effectively would make it so that way your sentries are probably going to be doing more damage than you, especially if you have 4 of them out and you can just punch them to make it so that way they don't overheat. Moving on to the next skill tree in the mechanics skill set here, we got Shotgunner. And as you can expect, we're going to be focusing on shotguns. So our tier 1 here, calling Shotgun, is going to be basically like the other ones, where every skill point is going to make it better. In this case, the shotgun pellets damage fall off is reduced, which is not all that great. Acing it will reduce the spread of these pellets while you're in ADS, which may not be bad. I mean, it does give your shotgun more range, as well as let you perform more damage onto one target. But I'm not sure if personally this is something that I really care about. Unlike the tier 2 skill Point Blank, which is going to make it so that way shotguns do more damage to enemies within 3 meters of you, which does seem a little too close. I feel like there should be a little bit more, maybe more like 5 meters. But the base version of it is 20% and the ace version is 60, which is significant. That is a lot of damage. Shotguns already do a bunch, so having 60% more? I want to see how shotguns go up against dozers. We're going to need more dozers. We're going to need newer and more powerful versions of dozers like we had in Payday 2 with all the skill changes we're having here. The other tier 2 one is stockpile, so you know what that one is. But the tier 3 one, speed loader, as you can expect, is going to make it so that way you can reload faster. And the way it works is it doesn't just give you a faster reload, you have to actually hit enemies, and depending on how many pellets hit your enemies will make your reload faster. The base version will increase it by 1%, but the ace version will make it 2.5 instead of 1%. I'm assuming these are permanent for that heist. So at the beginning of the heist, you're going to be reloading pretty slowly. I'm assuming by the end of it, you're going to be reloading at max speed, which is honestly a pretty cool idea. You kind of build yourself up as the heist progresses, because normally as we have it right now, you kind of want to finish the heist as fast as you can so that way you don't run out of resources. But having it so the player kind of balances that out by becoming stronger as time goes on with the heist, it's kind of a cool idea. While your resources deplete, your skill increases. Now, while we have the tier 2 skill point blank, which will increase the damage to enemies that are within 3 meters, annihilation, the next tier 3 skill, will make it so that way you do 4% more damage for each pellet that hits the same target, and that will make it 10% when you ace it. I'm not sure how many enemies are going to survive being shot more than twice with a shotgun, except for maybe the dozer, but other than that, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. I think we're going to need a new level of difficulty with stronger enemies, just to justify some of these skills. Now, our final skill here for shotgunner, I think it might pair very well with speed loader, because berserker here is going to make it so that way you take less damage after you reload. Acing will make it so that way you can reload and fire shotguns while sprinting.
I'm hoping this also carries over to sliding, because while I don't do it a lot personally, it was something that we saw in the trailer, and I want to keep that going forward. Not to mention the dodge potential there.
This would probably pair very well with any shotgun that you have to reload 1 shell at a time. This means that you will have a very long reload period, and during that period of time, you're taking 50% less damage.
But this is for enemies that are within 5 meters. It's not going to help you a lot with a sniper.
Moving on to our last skill tree under mechanic, we have Electrician, which focuses on shock grenades, which for the longest time has been my main go-to for grenades. Our tier 1 gets better with every point you put in the skill line. Skill shock factor will make it so that way the base version of it will have it where it increases the radius by 6%. And acing will make it so that way the electricity from the shock grenade will bounce 1 additional time. I'm assuming this means that it's going to be able to chain from one person to another person 1 extra time. Kind of like the Wonder Waffle from COD Zombies, which will become a much more understandable comparison as we continue on this skill line. Moving on to our tier 2, of course, we have stockpile, but the other one we have is stunned, which is a very simple one. It just increases the duration of the shock grenades by 25%, and acing it will make it 75%, effectively just making the shock grenade a lot more effective at what it already does, which isn't a bad thing, but we do want something that's going to make it a bit more unique. That's something that's saved for the second half of this skill tree, starting with Electric Tenderizer. What this skill does is it makes it so that way any enemy hit by the same pulse of the shock grenade will take an additional 10% damage from all sources, which this will increase to 25% when you ace it. It seems like a fairly simple one, but it does make it so that way it's a lot easier to clear the crowd of people that are being shocked. This is going to be something that's going to work very well with a skill tree we're going to see later on. Now, I'm operating under the assumption that every time an enemy is hit by a pulse from that same shock grenade, this is going to stack, which pairs very well with the other tier 3 skill, Renewable Energy, because the base version of it will make it so that way the shock grenades now put out 2 additional pulses. So let's set up a scenario here. You see an enemy and you throw a shock grenade at it. The first pulse goes off and they get stunned. The second pulse goes off and now they have that 25% stacked on them. The second pulse goes off and now it's 50. The addition of the other 2 pulses makes it so now it's 100%, meaning all the damage that they receive is now doubled. Of course, this operates under the assumption that it does stack. Now, while stockpile will make it so that way you have more shock grenades from the beginning, acing Renewable Energy will make it so that way it's easier for you to restock on those shock grenades, because destroying a zapper's battery or landmine will now make it so that way you get 1 shock grenade back. You're going to catch me later on making a video talking about how I play through the game as a zapper, throwing these shock grenades and using nothing but like a pistol or something. Now, our final skill here in tier 4 will basically add insult to injury and combines well with the previous 2 skills. This skill is called Highly Conductive. It makes it so every time an enemy is hit by a shock grenade pulse, they will lose 1 layer of armor for as long as they are stunned. So imagine that they're stunned, has no armor, and now take double the amount of damage. But this effect only works while they're stunned, and they will regain those layers that they lost once the stun wears off. Now, if you were to ace this skill, that's when this grenade turns into Wonder Waffle, because it will then emit an electric pulse from any enemy killed while they're under the effects of the shock grenade. So you're going to throw a grenade down into a group, it's going to shock them, it's going to have a big pulse because you have a lot of these skills added up. On top of that, it's going to go off multiple times, constantly removing their layers of armor, as well as making so that way they receive more damage, making them a lot easier to kill. Every time they die, then they will shock other enemies around them. Unfortunately, this does not stack. You can't just keep chaining people together across the entire map. It will only work for anyone who was actually affected by the shock grenade initially. Either way though, this is really cool. This is going to add like a fun little mini game or like meta game that's going on while you're playing the heist. One that doesn't distract you from the gameplay like the buffs do currently. So I'm really excited to give Electrician a try. I think it's going to pair very well with an adrenaline build. So here we are at the halfway mark, and this is probably going to end up being my longest video yet. I just realized that while recording audio, because I'm about, 50 minutes in? Almost 50 minutes into recording this audio. Like, this is crazy. Of course, that's how much audio that I actually have saved here. I mean, I've been doing this for about 3 hours now. I actually had to take a break, which is why if my voice sounds different, I actually just recently woke up and continued recording audio. Now our next set of skill trees falls under the Hacker, and our first skill tree in the Hacker set is Black Hat. Ah, a villainous fan. Now this skill tree focuses primarily on ECMs and cameras, such as Security Expert, which will allow you to hack the cameras. You also gain 1 runtime and an additional 1 for every skill you put into this tree. Acing it will allow you to hack drones. Now this applies to both the ones that are in stealth and act as cameras, as well as the techies' combat drones. Hacking the stealth ones will make it so that way they go blind for 7 seconds, and hacking the combat ones will make them indestructible and fight on your side for 7 seconds. And afterwards they self-destruct. Now, I'm not quite sure if that's something that I personally would get a lot of use out of. I'm not quite sure how the combat drones are going to be when it comes to fighting one of their own. I wonder if they're strong enough to even take on a single unit. They break so easily when you shoot at them, so how is it when the enemy shoots at them? As for the stealth ones, I don't really care for that. I mean, like them going blind for 7 seconds, is it really that much of a big deal? But the base version is basically something that you want to get when you are stealthing, and I feel like the ace version is good to get if you're using a stealth build and you're just wondering, hey, where should I put this extra point? And honestly, acing Security Expert isn't a terrible idea just because it gives you that 1 extra runtime from the base version of Security Expert. Hey there, it's October 3rd, Caboose, and before I move on to the next skill, there's something that I came up with that I feel like I really need to talk about when it comes to drones. Just want to point out real quick though, I recorded most of this audio like a week ago. There was just a lot of editing that needed to be done to the audio just because of how much there was. I had to chop some things down and I came up with some ideas as I was going on, so it just became longer and smaller, and it just kept fluctuating. This is all my fault, of course. I shouldn't have tried to do this all improv and actually wrote down a script and pulled all my ideas together. Instead, I just kind of felt like coming up with ideas on the spot, and I think that was my biggest mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I don't typically do that. I don't know why I decided to do that here. So once again, I apologize for how long it's taken me to get this video out. But I want to talk about the drones real quick here. I've come up with 2 ideas on how you can improve the drones so that way, 1, the techie is more of a problem for the player, while also making this skill way more useful for the player. First off, let's talk about the drone that debuffs you when you get flashbanged by it. Currently, when it flashbangs you, you get locked out of having any buffs for like 30 seconds or something. But obviously, when they get rid of Grit, Edge, and Rush, you're not going to be able to have that problem anymore. But these drones will still be useful because these new skill trees will give us different kinds of buffs than what we currently have. What I want to know is if this skill will apply to this drone, and I think it should, because it will make the skill more desirable. You want these skills to all be as desirable as possible. So I think it would be important to have one of those drones actually fight for you, and I think I know how they should work. What I think they should do is fly towards the enemy, flashbanging a group, and anybody who was caught in the flash is then marked. This may not seem useful at first, but a lot of the skills in these new skill trees give you buffs when you're fighting marked enemies. That would open up this skill to be useful in a lot of different synergies. The other idea that I had that I came up with last night at like 2 or 3 a.m. is the idea of a medic drone for the techie. Tiffany here only currently has 2 drones, and the problem with that is that while one of them will remove all your buffs and is actually kind of terrifying, the other one doesn't really do much. It just shoots you and does very little damage. It used to be super overpowered when they first were introduced, but now Tiffany is no longer the threat that she used to be. While I am glad we don't have to deal with those overpowered drones, I do feel like she needs needs something else in her kit. Having a medic drone will make us want to seek her out more. Right now, I don't really focus on looking for techies so much because she's not so much of a threat. Having a medic drone that will prevent her teammates from dying like in Payday 2 would make me want to go find her. Now, if I can convert that drone to fight for me, what I think it should do is fly up to me, combust, and then just drop maybe a couple of first aid kits. You don't want something super overpowered that's just going to let you farm stuff off of them, because then why would you want to hunt her down and prevent her from giving you more health? I'd like to know what you guys think of this idea. Well, anyway, let's get back to the video. The reason is because for the tier 2 skill playback, you're going to want those runtimes in order to give you an extra camera loop that you can use. Or say using its ace ability to make it so that way the hack camera will automatically mark guards and law enforcement for you, which is great on stealth, but I'm assuming because it says law enforcement, that's something that they expect you to also use in loud. But if I'm building a stealth build, I'm probably not going to be doing a lot of loud unless I messed up really close to the end of the heist. And this idea of using this tree in loud continues on to Pump the Jam, the other tier 2 skill, which replaces what we would normally see as stockpile. And it helps out by just making so that way your ECMs will then mark things for you. Now, the part where it marks the cameras is something that I could see as something that can help you in stealth. I'm not sure how useful it would be though. The other two aspects of it though don't seem all that useful. If you know where the FBI vans are in the map, you don't really have to worry about it. And marking every special type of enemy for your crew isn't the biggest necessity. That is, unless of course they have a skill that's going to really take advantage of marked enemies. Now, acing this skill so that way you have an extra ECM jammer is something that can be very useful for stealth. So you'd basically be getting the normal as kind of just a bonus. So the base version of Pump the Jam is basically just a bonus for you. And while a lot of this stuff is subject to change, I feel like this skill tree is something that will need to be changed because ECM jammers don't play a lot into a lot of these skills that we see in any of these skill trees. For instance, the other two skill trees in the hacker skill set don't involve ECMs whatsoever. And we won't hear about ECMs again until the tier 4 of this tree. Because when it comes to the tier 3 skills, the first one, Radio Star, gives you the ability to hack the guards' radios, something that we currently have available to us. And I would say if you're stealthing, this is a necessity, especially acing it too. I mean, 10 seconds, that's really good. And the other one, High Marks, is basically the only way that these ECMs are going to be useful in loud. But you can also use a motion sensor or a trip laser. But what you can't do with those ones is get more of them, which is something that you can get with the tier 4 skill in this tree. With Black Hat's electrical interface, acing it will make it so that way every time you destroy a Zapper's battery, you gain 1 ECM, something that you can't do with motion sensors or trip lasers in any of the skills that we have in these trees. And the base version of this basically gives you the Hacker perk deck from Payday 2, which in itself is basically just ECM feedback. The base version of this will make it so that way anytime an ECM jammer is active, any enemy shot will be stunned for 5 seconds. Which isn't bad, but it's not the greatest. I mean, it doesn't work for dozers, which is the one enemy that I would really want it for. I mean, if I'm shooting at an enemy, if he gets stunned, I mean, he's already gonna die. I'm not quite sure how useful this one's gonna actually be. I think this tree overall is the one that's probably gonna need the most rework so far. But I wanna know what you guys think on this one. Hey, third pass-through Caboose here. I mean, I've been editing this thing over the course of several days, though I haven't been doing it over the weekend because I've been Uber driving because that's my only source of income right now. But I did realize that afterwards, after recording this initially, that, well, I mean, this skill tree will be a lot more useful as we continue on through this, so keep that in mind. Alright, next up is Hitman. Now this one is really cool. I love the tier 4 on this one, but hold on, before we get there, let's do the other one. For tier 1 we got Pistoler, which is basically the same stuff as you would expect, you know, extra damage, as well as accuracy bonus if you got it aced, with the stat increasing with every point you put into the skill line. For tier 2, of course, we got our stockpile, but then we also have quick draw, which makes it so that way swapping to or from handguns will be faster, as well as the ADS speed. The base version of this skill is 20%, with the aced version being 70%. Now, this may not seem all that useful right now, but trust me, stick with me, and it will be useful. Moving to tier 3, we got Spatial Awareness, and this one's a little tricky. Basically, killing a marked enemy with the handgun will make it so that way another enemy is marked, which doesn't seem all that useful unless you ace the ability. Because for every marked enemy you kill with a pistol, you gain 5 HP, but if you ace it, you get 30. This will ultimately help you sustain a lot longer and not have to go for medkits as often. And if you're already at maxed HP, well, that's just going to be adrenaline, baby. This is going to be one of the first of many skills you're going to see where you can get adrenaline. Then we have Cheap Trick, which base version makes it so that way you take less damage while you're holding a person as a human shield.
Now this doesn't seem all that useful, but the aced version is what we're really looking forward to. Having it where you can deal double damage with a handgun is going to be really good for what the tier 4 skill does. And it's going to accompany well with the shock grenade and all the skills that go along with that. Just imagine chaining all those shocks together and, all those stunned people. It's going to be really easy to kill them. Now, why this is important is because of tier 4, Bounty Hunter. This makes it so that way you receive something based on the marked special enemy you kill. If it's a zapper, then you restore 1 tool. A nader, 1 throwable. Cloaker, you heal for 20% of your maximum HP. Techie, you get a broken armor chunk back. And a dozer restores 1 down. Acing this skill is going to double all the benefits. Bounty Hunter essentially causes a metagame to happen when you're using pistols. Now there's a benefit to switching to your pistols to finish off any special unit. This is why quick draw is going to be actually really helpful. This is also where I feel like that shock grenades and flashbangs are going to become really useful, because then you can mark the enemies with them as well as weaken them, so that way you can swap to your pistol and shoot them, getting some kind of a bonus. I can see there being a lot of synergies with the Bounty Hunter, and I love this concept. This skill tree is going to make pistols a lot more useful, which may not seem like a big deal, but Payday 2 pistols were actually really good, or at least until a certain point. Like the Baby Deagle is a fantastic pistol. Now, let's say you don't want to bring shock grenades for whatever reason. Instead, you want to bring flash grenades. Well, the next skill tree has you covered. Flashpoint. Let's razzle dazzle them, all right? This time around, our tier 1 is going to make it so the base version is going to have a higher duration, and the aced version is going to increase the range of the flashbang. The same rules apply here when it comes to investing skill points into this tree. Moving into tier 2, we once again have stockpile. Whoops, wrong one. But we also have flash mob. Now, this one is very confusing to me because the base one makes it so that way flash grenades are silent, which makes them undetectable to anybody outside of the flash radius. I'm not sure what the point of this one is. In what way is this one ever going to be useful? The only one that Nova and I were able to figure out is that maybe on the 2nd floor of No Rest for the Wicked, that little office area with all the civilians, that's the only place we can really think of it being that useful. I'm not sure what a silent flash grenade is really going to accomplish. On top of that, the aced one is also kind of iffy. Having civilians that are caught by your flashbangs not be able to run away for about 2 minutes is not all that important. Honestly, I don't know how important this one really is. This kind of still feels a little underpowered and might need some reworking. Now, with a tier 3, there might be a better use for the flashbang for the Hitman tree as opposed to maybe the shock grenades. Because in tier 3, we have Spotlight, which makes it so that enemies that are caught by your flashbangs are marked for the entire crew. So now that they're not only marked, but they're also stunned, you're going to get all the bonuses from the previous tree. And acing this skill will give you an additional ammo box just on top of everything else, which is always nice, especially if you have shotguns with you, as those things don't have the greatest ammo pickup. The other tier 3 skill, Hypersensitive, mimics that of what we saw with the impact grenades all the way back in the Grenadier skill. I don't remember what it was called, but it's basically the same thing. They blow up on impact. Now, obviously, they're not going to do more damage, so instead they're just going to make the stun duration last twice as long if you ace it. And with our tier 4, we reuse another idea from the Grenadier tree. With Sunburn, you'll do more damage to any enemy that's affected by your flashbang. Now, one thing that I've wondered when it comes to this one is, does it have synergy with SM Genius all the way back in Spec Ops? Because the ace version of that one has it where the bonus refreshes whenever you break an enemy's armor, but it does not specify that it has to be caused by an SMG. So if it doesn't have to be caused by an SMG, does this count towards that? If so, then having an SMG with your flashbangs would be a really good combo. The only downside is this can only happen once per enemy, which I guess is fair. But to be fair, once you flashbang the enemies, they're going to be a lot easier to kill if you have this skill aced. So it's not like they're going to be alive for very long. Well, that's a very morbid way to say it. So with that, we wrap up on the Hacker skill tree set and we move on to the Conman set. First off, we have Imposter. This skill tree mostly centers around adrenaline as well as doing things while you're unmasked, which you can see with the first skill, Adrenaline Junkie. The base version will give you adrenaline, and acing it will give you a little bit of adrenaline if you're unmasking within another civilian, which is a little confusing and doesn't seem all that useful. I mean, yeah, I guess it might give you like a movement speed bonus, but I'm not quite sure how much of a difference that's going to make, especially if it goes down. But we can fix that with, I believe, Thrill Seeker here on tier 2. The base version will make it so if you're unmasked and you have adrenaline, it will no longer go down, and acing it will make it so that way you move faster. So that's where it becomes useful, but it also seems like something that is only useful for stealth. Obviously, if it's loud, you're going to wear a mask. And having higher mobility is useful in stealth, so this is something that I would definitely use on a stealth build, but it wouldn't really get a lot of use out of it, to be honest with you. Taking damage while you're unmasked makes it so that when you put your mask on, so it's not like it's something that's going to be around forever. The other skill we have in Tier 2 Plain Sight is something that I believe we already have. The base version makes it so that way cameras detect you slower in private areas if you're unmasked, and the Ace version does the same thing but with employees in secure areas. Once again, a skill that's meant for stealth. And when it comes to stealth-based skills, you're most likely going to throw everything you have into stealth. That doesn't mean that this is a bad skill to have, this just means that you're not going to use this in your loud build. Continuing with the trend of stealth, we have Strong Armed. This skill will allow you to use a throwable weapon while you're unmasked. This is actually quite useful if you have throwing knives, as you can use them to distract guards. Now, the aced version here is what you're going to actually want, because unlike Powerlifter all the way back in like our first skill tree, this skill, when it's aced, is what will make it so that way it will reduce the movement penalty when carrying heavy bags and items. So if you were to combine the both of them, you could have maximum movement with 2 bags. Now, while this would be great to have on a loud build, the problem is you're going to have to waste a point on something that's useful for stealth. Now, like I said before, this is all subject to change. So it's possible that this aced version of this skill will be moved somewhere else, or reworked entirely. Now, there will be a skill tree later on that focuses on throwing knives. So maybe if you're doing like a throwing knife heavy build, this could potentially be useful, but then again, it's not useful for every loud build. So I'm not sure how to feel about this. But for the most part, what we've seen so far isn't very useful for loud. It's mostly for stealth, which carries on into Hall Pass, the other Tier 3 skill. This one I think is also something we already have, where it just makes it so that way you no longer have to worry about being detected when performing illegal actions while you're unmasked. Now, Tier 4 Seeing Red is something that can be useful in loud. Having this will make it so that way when you have adrenaline, you'll gain a damage bonus. Unfortunately, having it so that way the damage only scales based on how many points you put into this tree, as if it was a Tier 1 skill, really negatively affects its ability to be used in loud, since you're not going to put a lot of points into stealth stuff when you're going loud. This skill would only be useful for when you fail at stealth, but you're close enough where you just want to continue in loud. I think for the official release, they should consider making it so that way it's not based on how many points you put into this tree. Otherwise, it might come off as a bit too niche, kind of like having silenced flashbangs. Moving on to our next Conman skill tree, we have Pill Pusher, where we can discover that a healthy crew is a happy crew. So as you can imagine, that this is going to be a skill tree surrounding the med bags, making this Dallas's favorite skill tree. First up on Tier 1, we have Doctor's Orders. This gives us the convenience of reviving crewmates faster, which is always a nice thing to have. Now, I believe the skill is currently called Combat Medic, where if you revive a crew member while you have grit, you both become invincible for a little bit. Well, that continues with the aced version of this skill, and that time increases for every skill you put into this tree. So if you're going to be bringing med bags, completing this tree is probably not a terrible idea. For our Tier 2, we have 2 versions of Field Medic here. These both basically just give us more charges and med kits in total. Something that I think a lot of us, especially those adrenaline junkies like myself out there, are going to really appreciate. Speaking of adrenaline, our first Tier 3 skill, Pain Tolerance, does involve adrenaline. This is a fantastic skill to have if you're an adrenaline user like myself. Not only does it give you a damage reduction on your adrenaline, but it also makes it so you gain 25 adrenaline from all the loose cash you steal. Finally, some use for these things. I mean, I know they made it a lot more useful when the overskill system came out, because now it also helps charge your overkill weapon. But hey, who doesn't want an extra buff, right? On top of that, it makes it so if you perform a takedown or kill an enemy with a throwing knife or revive a crewmate, or if a crewmate uses your med bag, you also gain adrenaline. And when you ace this skill, you get more downs. Half of the points that you put into this tree get turned into downs. Meaning if you max out this tree, you're gonna get 6 extra downs. That is, of course, if we're operating under the assumption that everything only takes 1 point. You could have a total of 10 downs. And on top of that, if you're using a pistol and you have bounty, every time you kill a dozer, you're gonna get your downs back. Meaning you could just basically never get put into custody if you're good enough with a pistol. Not to mention all the health and adrenaline you're gonna get for using said pistol.
And if you're running adrenaline, then you're definitely going to want the next skill. Scar tissue over here makes it so that way your maximum health increases for each down you suffer. So the more downs you have, the more your health will increase. Acing it makes it so that way the amount of downs you have left will give you more health. Essentially, either way you look at it, you're looking at a 20% increase of your HP. This is honestly an amazing synergy. I mean, this is a great skill tree right here for adrenaline. I'm going to be using this one for sure. And to make it even better, Tier 4 Health Guru makes it so that way your med bags now heal 100% of a heister's max health. It says a heister, so I'm assuming that also means your crewmates. Now, the ace version of this skill is kind of a jokey one, but I love the idea. And I say jokey because it's a really funny idea to have in your head, right? Think of it this way. The ace version says that whenever you deploy a medic bag, you and all your crewmates within 5 meters of that med bag will return to full health. It'll also revive any down heisters within those 5 meters. So if you see someone down, you could just throw a med bag down and run away. Now, what I do wonder is if this goes along with the aced version of Doctor's Orders. Does this count as you reviving them, and are you then both immune to damage for however long you have it for? That's my main question here. I feel like these are all questions that I'm going to have to write down and then do a video talking about once these all come out. I mean, this is probably going to all change by then, so I'm probably going to have to talk about them anyway at some point. But if they don't change too much, then I'll just kind of talk about the differences from this video. Overall, adrenaline junkies like myself are going to love the Pill Pusher skill line. I think we can all agree this is an amazing one to use. I mean, I'm sure you don't need to use all of them, but why wouldn't you? There's so many good skills here. And it does have synergy with the next skill tree as well, Cutthroat. This tree is all about the throwing knives. I don't know about you, but when I play Payday 3, there's only 2 instances of me using throwing knives. If I'm stealthing or I need to get some kills with them for a daily. It's not that they're bad, it's just that I like the other throwables more. But some of the ideas in this skill tree make me want to use them more in loud. And honestly, now that I'm recording this skill tree, I'm starting to realize that a lot of the ways you could approach your heights, while they may or may not be super effective, will at least be fun to try, giving you that variety on what you can do in Payday like we've been wanting. I mean, the base version of the Tier 1 Knife Expert is nothing too spectacular. I mean, you get an additional knife for every point you have in this tree, which while it's seemingly not that spectacular, at the very least means you have a lot more throwing knives, something that you can already recover. But the aced version will allow your throwing knives to penetrate an additional enemy for each point you put in this tree. So imagine you got 12 points in here. Could you then throw the throwing knife through 12 enemies? And another question I have is, what is the penetration level on the shield's shield? Could I just throw a throwing knife through the shield and kill him? And the AI in Payday 3 are already programmed to hide behind the shield. So theoretically, you could kill like a whole line of cops by just throwing a throwing knife, right? Now for our Tier 2 skills, we don't have Stockpile, believe it or not. Probably because the Tier 1 basically is Stockpile. Instead, first off, we have Laceration, which will make it so that way our throwing knives will cause a bleed effect. And acing it will just make it stronger. Unfortunately, this is nothing too spectacular. I'm not quite sure how effective it's gonna be. Not unless you got something like Anarchist, which unfortunately isn't in this game. The second Tier 2 Deep Wounds will just make the throwing knives deal more damage, with a base of 20%, and acing it will bring you up to 60%. Now the question I have with this one is, how much more damage do you really need with the throwing knives? For most of the units, it can kill them instantly. I believe the only 2 that it can't kill with one shot is the Dozer and I think the Shield. But don't quote me on the Shield one. So I'm not quite sure how useful this would be with the current way the game plays. We might need a new difficulty just to make this one useful. Moving into our first Tier 3 skill, we have Prison Shiv. This one is pretty simple. It makes it so that way once you pick up a certain amount of ammo boxes, you will get another throwing knife back. And it does specifically say throwing knives. So you can't use this with, say, frag grenades or flashbangs. The base version requires you to pick up 5 ammo boxes, and acing it will reduce it down to 3. The trade-off is that you won't get throwing knives back when you use a teammate's ammo bag. But since ammo bags aren't commonly used by heisters, you probably should just pick this one up. You're not going to really gain any kind of a negative for it. Since now you're going to be able to have not only more throwing knives, but also get them back faster, you might as well get the other Tier 3 skill, Fan Throw. This skill allows you to throw more more than just one throwing knife at a time. The base version lets you throw 2 at a time, and acing it lets you throw 3, with you spending the equivalent amount of throwing knives. This is great if you're trying to do a lot of damage to one target, say a bulldozer. It would be cool if you can kind of toggle however many you want to throw, but I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think based on whichever one you have is whatever's going to happen. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if it's easy for you to get ammo boxes so that way you can get throwing knives back, then why not at least get the base version? Now the last skill here, Hidden Blade, is another one of those skills that's also going to change the way you play the game. Hidden Blade has it where as long as you have one throwing knife, you can perform a quick melee on an enemy and spend that knife to instantly kill the target. Of course, it doesn't apply to dozers, and as a punishment, you can't get your knives back. And acing this skill makes it so that way you don't actually need to have a knife, but it's going to give you a 30-second cooldown if you don't have any left. But if you have Prison Shiv aced, I don't feel like you're going to have a problem finding throwing knives to begin with. I mean, as long as they hit a target, you can pick them up again. You're going to start seeing some challenge runs where people are going around doing nothing but throwing knives and stabbing enemies. I swear it's going to happen. If not, I'm going to do it myself. I feel like I'm getting really energetic while doing this, and that's mainly because it's getting really hot in this room. I've been recording this audio for about 4 hours. I've been taking several breaks during this. This is like my longest recording session ever for a video. So I apologize if I start to seem like I'm getting angry, but I'm just more or less getting really excited talking about everything. Also because I'm on my ADHD meds, and that can really kind of skew the way I record audio sometimes. But we've come this far, so we have to finish up with our last set of skill trees. What we have here is the Professional, and first up we got the Puppet Master. This one is all about hostages. First up we got the Trade Broker, which makes it so that way each hostage you trade counts as an additional hostage. And acing it will make it so that way you can trade hostages faster. These are skills that we already have in the game, and I think it makes a lot of sense to have them return for skills 2.0. Our tier 2 will have Magnetic Charm, which will make it so that way guards, employees, and law enforcement are worth more. Acing it though only gives you the benefit of being able to move 5 hostages at once, which isn't all that important unless you're someone who really cares about your hostages. And while hostages are more important in Payday 3 than they were in the previous 2 entries, I'm not sure if this one is all that worth it. Might only be worth it just to get more benefit from Trade Broker. The other tier 2 skill, Consumerism, just increases the amount of consumables that you can carry. You know, like armor repair kits. This is something that's honestly not too important, but I do think it can serve some kind of purpose if you just have a point that you don't know what to do with. If you're running an adrenaline build, you're not going to have a lot of these lying around. Honestly, I don't really use them too much. I mainly just carry the 3. That's perfectly fine with me. But if you're someone who has an armor build who needs to constantly repair them, this might actually be very useful for you. Moving on to tier 3, the first skill we got here is Human Resources. And this one, I feel like if you're going to get the base version, you might as well also get the ace version because the change in it is just so drastic. What it does is it makes it so that way if you trade 60 hostages, you get 1 more deployable bag for your current loadout. It doesn't work for sentries, but it's great if you really want more medkits. Acing it just reduces that to 30 instead of 60. The problem I have with this one is how many levels can you say that you will actually trade 30 hostages? Obviously you have a heist like Golden Shark and No Rest for the Wicked, but you're not going to be on No Rest for the Wicked for very long. If you use this fun strategy that Nova and I did on Syntax Error, where you start kidnapping people who are walking on the street, then you could definitely find a use for this, but I'm not sure how useful that would be. I mean, it would go well with the other skill we have here, Scare Tactics. This is the skill that lets you take guards, SWAT, and heavy SWAT hostage. This skill also is another case of if you're going to get the base version, then you got to get the ace version because that will let you have 3 of them. And while that is very useful, I don't know how often you're going to really want this. It actually might not be all that great with Human Resources, because you can only trade the hostages in between waves, which means that you can only trade 3 at a time. You'd have to go through 10 waves just to get 1 deployable back. And the only time that I think you could go through that many waves is on Cook-Off. But there's a certain point at Cook-Off where it just enters the final charge where there is no in-between waves. You'd have to postpone cooking meth in order to create more deployables. And at that point, I don't think it's going to be all that useful. I think Human Resources is definitely something that they're going to have to redo. Now, the last skill here in Tier 4 is something that I can see being very useful. Having a damage reduction for every hostage tied around you within a 15 meters, which is actually pretty large, is kind of helpful. Hostages are already more useful because naders won't throw gas grenades on top of them. So in a heist like say Houston Breakout where you have to search the evidence and double check them in the machine, which takes a lot of time, having a few hostages in there will be perfect because then you'll take a damage reduction and you won't have to worry about gas. There seems to be a lot of opportunity in these skill trees to reduce damage. I bet you there's going to be a build that's all about doing that. Now let's get on to the next skill tree. Next up, we have Longshot. And as you can expect, this is meant for snipers and marksman rifles. The tier 1 head games will make it so that way you have a better headshot multiplier. And acing it will make it so that way you will deal 10% more damage for every shot you hit, and you lose 10% for every shot you miss. Which, to be fair, if you're using a marksman rifle, you're already aiming for the head. Moving into our tier 2, we have Stockpile, which this time for some reason it's on the left side of the tree. The entire time we've been talking about this, they've always been on the right side of tier 2. This time on the right side of tier 2, we have Skull Trauma. What this does is just increase your headshot damage by 15%. However, acing it will make it so that way you reload 20% faster. Now that's something I can get behind. While they may not be the slowest weapon to reload, it's always nice to be able to get back into the action quickly. For tier 3, we have Armor Piercing, and as you would expect, this involves removing the enemy's armor layers. For every headshot you land that breaks that armor, you'll remove an additional layer. Now this makes me wonder how armor layers work in this game. Because how many headshots does it normally take to remove a layer of armor? It's a headshot. You already got a multiplier on there. Are they even going to survive long enough to be shot in the head a second time? That sure was a sentence I just said. Now the ace version of this does seem pretty good because aiming down sights you'll be able to penetrate an additional target. Something that you can already do with snipers, but why not be able to do them with marksman rifles too then? Now see, what this pairs very well with is the fact that they increase the amount of enemies that spawn in during waves. So it's a lot more likely now to get collateral kills. Either way, that's still pretty good because crowd control is something that snipers really do struggle with. I mean, they've gotten better since they added the armor penetration for them, but there's nothing wrong with having more. I mean, who doesn't want to recreate the triple headshot scene from Nobody? Which, by the way, if you haven't seen that movie, go see it. It's honestly, I think it's as good as John Wick. It's like John Wick, but a comedy as well. Boy, that would be a fun crossover now, wouldn't it? Instead of having John Wick in Payday 3, we have Nobody. That would be... Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. Starbreeze, can we have Hutch, please? Now, the other tier 3 skill we have, I think, will somewhat reduce the need to ace Skull Trauma. This skill return policy will make it so that way whenever you get a headshot, you will have a bullet return to your magazine. However, this skill does have a cooldown of 6 seconds, but when you ace it, it will go down to 3 seconds. I feel like this is a lot more of a convenient thing to have than a necessity. It would help you reduce the amount of times you would need to reload, but that 3-second cooldown does mean that at a certain point, you will most likely have to reload. Not a bad skill to get, but it probably wouldn't be a priority for me. Not unlike the tier 4 skill. It's finally back, folks. It finally returned. It's under a new name, calling itself Ricochet, but here we see the return of a fan favorite, Graze. In Payday 2, if you are running a sniper build, then you have to have Grazed Aced. And in Payday 3, if you're running a sniper or a marksman rifle, then you gotta get Aced Ricochet. This skill will make it so that way your sniper has a lot of crowd control potential. Being able to deal 100% of the damage that you dealt to one person's head to everybody within a 2-meter radius of it, I mean, just the shield potential. Remember, the SWAT like to hide behind the shield unit, so if you can kill one of those people, you're gonna damage everybody there. Hallways are gonna be a prime place for you to sit and just keep getting headshots. Now you might be thinking the best thing to shoot at would be the Dozer, but here's the thing. Dozer's faceplate don't count as a head, it counts as the face. Meaning as long as it's got head protection, you're not going to be doing a bunch of damage to everyone around it. Unless, of course, that changes specifically to accommodate this skill. I mean, maybe with a sniper it wouldn't be too much of a problem because that already has armor penetration. But I'm not sure. It will be something that I would love to fiddle around with once we actually get Skills 2.0 fully released. And now we reach the final skill tree that I have to talk about here, and it's the one, unfortunately, that I'm the least excited to discuss. We kind of started off this whole thing with some skill trees that were okay, and we're ending on one that's also basically the same. The skill tree here, Ammo Specialist, as you would expect, focuses on ammo bags, and if you remember what I said before, they're not all that important. I do appreciate Starbreeze trying to make them more useful, but I don't think this skill tree is going to make that much of a difference. The tier 1 skill Munitions Expert will make it so that way anytime anyone uses your ammo bag, they'll get an additional amount of ammo. And acing it will also make it so that way they'll get an additional throwable. This number, of course, increases for every point you put into this skill line. Now, while this does seem like something that could be useful for people who are using a lot of throwables, once again, I still don't think that ammo is all that important. Because if your build is struggling with ammo, then you need to have a different build. That's the way I always look at it. You shouldn't ever need to bring ammo bags. And much like our tier 2 when it came to pill pusher, the tier 2 here for the ammo bags is basically the exact same. You have armor up 1 and armor up 2. Both give you additional charges as well as an additional ammo bag. The tier 3 skill utility belt does actually give you a bonus that I think is actually useful. This allows you to carry 2 additional throwables, and acing will make it so that way it's 5 additional instead of 2. This is good if you're doing a throw heavy build, like say having a lot of throwing knives or grenades. It's the only skill in this tree that I could see myself using. The other tier 3 skill here is bullet frenzy, and that's something that I think we had in Payday 2. It makes it so that way any heister that uses your ammo bag will deal additional damage for 12 seconds. This damage bonus goes from 20% to 50% if you ace it. Now the tier 4 skill premium bag isn't too terrible. The only problem is you need to bring ammo bags. The normal for it is not all that important. Basically trying to tell people, hey, everyone gather around so that way you get more throwables is not something that's going to happen. Now the ace version isn't all that bad, because having it where that way when you interact with the bag you get more armor penetration is not bad. And this armor penetration bonus goes for the same duration as that bullet frenzy bonus. However, I'm not too sure how much of a difference 0.8 armor is gonna make. And what's a little strange is that this is the only skill I think in all these trees that give you a decimal for armor penetration. It's a little weird, right? As you can tell, I'm super excited to give these a try, but that doesn't mean that all of them are good. There are some that I have stated that I think need to be reworked. I think when it comes to the ammo bag stuff, they're gonna have to get a lot more creative to have us want to bring ammo bags. And you have to give it to Starbreeze for trying to figure out other ways to utilize certain equipment. There are a few things that are absent in these skill trees, like we don't have anything for the mines or the cameras or the motion sensors, but I feel like with the motion sensors, there are other ways you could utilize those. With all the skills involving marking enemies, that's where the motion sensors and the trip laser I think are going to be very useful. The only problem is that motion sensors I think go away after a while. I don't think they stick around permanently for that whole run, which makes sense as a balancing thing for like stealth or whatever, but I feel like they should stick around longer and they would be a lot more useful in loud when it comes to using some of these skills. One of the issues I always had when it came to marking enemies is that unless I'm playing with randos, I don't really have any reason to mark an enemy, and the only enemy I really want to mark are snipers and dozers. Mainly because those are the only ones that actually pose a threat that I might need some help with. Now I do bring a trip laser on basically every heist, but I often find myself forgetting to put it down. There are a few heists that I always try to remember to put it down, like for instance in the Houston breakout. Whenever I'm looking through the physical evidence, I usually put it at one of the doors because there's so many shelves in that room that it blocks my view of who's entering. And it's nice to know if something dangerous is coming through that door. Or for instance, cook-off. It's great on cook-off because there's different ways that they can enter the building. Now I am assuming that they're going to add more skill trees in the future, and it would be cool to see a skill tree or like a set of skill trees be tied to a specific character, kind of like perk decks. Or how in Payday 2, those 5 pages for your skills were all meant to be tied to a specific character, like Dallas being the mastermind, Hoxton being the fugitive, Houston being the ghost, but ultimately they ended up having perk decks tied to each character. Probably because those were a lot simpler to do. I mean, skills are a lot more complex. There's a lot of ways to become super overpowered if you have too many skills in the game. Not to mention, you're going to need to have more skill points available for people to have builds that are going to incorporate that stuff. There's a big issue of power creep when it comes to constantly adding new skills, so we'll see what they do in the future. Now, I do think this is a really good update for them to have. This is a huge change and something that we've desperately needed, but I'm not sure how much it's going to do when it comes to getting players to come back. I think Payday needs to do something drastic outside of the game in order to get players to kind of remember that this game exists and give it another try. Kind of like what Cyberpunk did with the Cyberpunk Edgerunners TV show. Regardless of what you think of that show, me personally, I didn't think it was all that great. It was something that did bring a lot of eyes back onto Cyberpunk and giving it another try. Something that was necessary because when the game came out, we all know it was super broken, but after the show came out, people gave it another try and realized that, yeah, they did fix a lot of the issues. While there were still issues, they weren't nearly as bad as it was on launch. And now players could fully appreciate the game for what it was. And while I think Payday is making a major step in the right direction with this update, I still think we need a lot more content. One of the things I think they need to do in order to really push this game forward is to add more weapon mods as well as rework the UI again. Not so much the main menu, but mainly just your inventory menu could use a rework.
Like, is it really necessary for me to be able to see my character on the right side of the screen when I'm scrolling through my weapons? I would much rather have the Payday 2 view where I can see a bunch of weapons at once. Having only 2 columns for weapons and masks is actually really tedious to scroll through. And as the arsenal gets bigger and bigger with every update, it's gonna be a lot more annoying to find that one gun. Not to mention, it would be nice to be able to reorganize my inventory, because, like, come on, having all the guns just in order from when I purchased them is a little annoying. I just gotta remember which DLC came first and with what was in it. As for the weapon mods, it would be nice to see more of them, as well as a rework for how we see the weapon stats. When Payday 2 came out, the weapon stats were shown the same way that they're shown in Payday 3 currently, before they eventually decided to do away with that and just stick with numbers, and I think that's what they should do. Now, I do know there are people who like seeing the stats as bars as opposed to numbers, but it would be nice to be able to see the numbers alongside the bars, because the problem I have is that some of the stats kind of are merged together. Like, for instance, when it comes to recoil, you have both vertical and horizontal recoil being calculated in this game, but they both fall under recoil. So while you might have it where you have no horizontal recoil and you have nothing but vertical, it will say that the recoil is really good when it's actually really bad. To me, it makes it really difficult to use the stats to figure out how to make the gun better. And if they add more mods to the game, it'll allow us to have more customization options for our guns. And having that paired up with a better way to view stats will mean that we can more effectively modify our weapons the way we want them. And while player customization and the skill system are things that players desperately want to have changed, one of the things that from what I have talked to with a lot of people is that they will come back to the game once they reintroduce melee. Now, I know we got the baseball bat as an overkill weapon, and that's a great weapon. I love using the baseball bat. But I have to agree, Payday 2 had a lot of melee weapons, and while a lot of them were useless or just kind of fun and memey, it was nice to have. It was cool, and I really liked it. I mean, at first they started off simple with just knives, and eventually you ended up getting stuff like pickaxes or broadswords. Not to mention, reintroducing melee weapons will allow them to add a skill tree that's just about melee. And now that I mentioned that, I also realize that there is no skill tree that affects overkill weapons, and this is probably because of the overskill system, which I think is fair. It does make sense that there's nothing for overkill weapons. They're already supposed to be the overpowered weapons, so having skills with them is just going to make them more overpowered. Not to mention, how are you going to make those work? They would have to be very generic, kind of like being able to, say, pick up ammo for it or something, you know what I mean? And now that we're finally done with all those skill trees, let's talk about that controversy I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Unless, of course, you skip through all that, in which case, welcome! Now, this controversy is something that happened the exact same day due to an update that also happened with Payday 2. However, this controversy actually goes back to the beginning of the month. Let's first talk about what happened on September 22nd when it comes to Payday 2. There was a new DLC added to the list of DLCs for Payday 2, but unlike the other DLCs which add new content, this one is a $5 subscription. And what that subscription gives you is access to all the DLC in the game for 1 month. Now hear me out here, because I don't think this is a terrible idea. Payday 2 has been free to purchase on Steam multiple times. On top of that, it's really cheap to just get the base version, especially when it's on sale. There are people out there who don't own any of the DLC for Payday 2, and with there being like 65 or 70 DLCs, you don't want to pay the $250 to get all of them. So what this does is it allows you to pay $5 to figure out which DLCs that you're actually going to want. That is, of course, unless you want to do the actual research to figure out which ones people tend to like. However, there was an alternative that you could go for. You could pick up the infamous collection of Payday 2, which comes with the base game and all of the DLC. Now, this is where the controversy really starts, because originally the price for this was $120. But as of September 1st, not September 22nd, that price was increased to $170. A whole $50 more for content that's already been out for several years. Remember, the last DLC for Payday 2 came out halfway through 2023. On top of that, there's actually less DLC available for the games now than there ever was. Back in 2020, Starbreeze lost the license to the Scarface character. And as of August 2024, they lost the rights to sell the John Wick heists and weapon pack, as well as the Point Break heists. So not only do they increase the price for old content, there's actually less content available in that pack. At first, I thought it might have been the case. However, the price increasing happened about a year after the DLC was removed, so it doesn't make sense. If they happened in the same update, then I could see that being the case. Something strange that I did notice during this period of time when the price was increased is that it didn't change on the Epic launcher. It was the original price. So this was an issue that was specific to Steam. And what I think makes this inexcusable is that it's something that went on for so long. It wasn't fixed within 24 to 72 hours. No, it went on for a few weeks. How many people purchased a copy of the Infamous Collection for $50 more than they should have? And that's my problem. Whether it was intentional or not doesn't excuse the fact that it went on for so long. It's really easy to see why people would get really upset about the subscription thing when the price has increased. Even if they have no plans on buying it, it does feel kinda scummy. Also, because we were expecting something new for Payday 2, there was an expectation that just was not met. I think the subscription DLC thing is a really poorly timed thing just because of how many subscriptions there are out there currently. Like, how many things are you paying monthly for right now? And this isn't supposed to be a clever segue into like a Rocket Money ad or anything because I'm not sponsored. Not to mention what happened just recently while I was making this video where Xbox increased the price of Game Pass. But going back to the Payday 2 DLC subscription model, y'all think it's a little weird that EA didn't do this for The Sims? They have so much DLC in those games, it would cost you, I think, a few $1,000s to buy all of them without it being on sale. Even if it's on sale, I bet you it's still gonna be like $1,000. So to kind of sum everything up, I like the new skills. Some of them need a little bit of reworking. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the DLC subscription thing, but I do think the $50 price hike doesn't make any sense, and that's a problem. Either way, I'm curious to know what you folks think of this situation, as well as what you guys think of the skills 2.0 that we went over. Do you think these skills are good? What are you looking forward to trying first? Is there any builds you have in mind? And if so, what are you gonna name that build? But until next time, stay hydrated, and as always, I love you. Bye-bye.